Well, thank you very much for staying till the end of the day. I do appreciate it. It's me left before the prizes, so I'm sure you're super excited to hear me talk rather than waiting for the prizes. But I'll give you the benefit of that. How about that? So, first of all, welcome to the day. Thanks so much for coming. VMUG's just an awesome thing. I hope you guys and girls have had a really good time today. Yeah, thanks for coming out to beautiful, gorgeous Solihull. Few laughs. Clicked timer. So, who am I? My name is Julian Wood. I'm originally from Cape Town in sunny South Africa, if you can hear from the dodgy accent. Decided many years ago to move to London, obviously for the weather. I'm a freelance infrastructure. I made a mistake on that one. I'm a freelance infrastructure architect. I think I'm one of you guys. I don't work for a vendor. I've got nothing to sell. I've got no swag to give away because it's basically food from my children's mouths. So I don't have anything to sell you or to convince you to buy from anything. I'm literally one of you guys. I work as an independent contractor in London, and I'm dealing with the good and the crap of IT every day. And so part of this presentation is I'm trying to be a proxy for you guys. I spend time looking at the future and trying to work out what's going on. And so hopefully I can give you some insights into the things that I'm doing. And if they're not the right insights, well, who am I to know? That's my caveat. How does that work? I blog at wooditwork.com. I'm a VMware V-expert for a number of years. Jack of some trades, probably master of none. So this presentation, I'm looking at the future of IT. And I'm trying to encourage people to think a bit differently. Sometimes we get very bogged down in the weeds of infrastructure. Well, I want to try and maybe open your eyes to a few things that are coming down the pipe. Looking at clouds, looking at the kinds of things that your businesses are probably asking for. I'm going to try and give you some tips on how to see the landscape of what's going on out there. Give you some other tips on where to focus and where to put stuff. Looking at some DevOpsy kind of stuff, because we've got to get more buzzwords in there. And today's a technical day as well. We can't just all talk marketing fluff, so we'll talk about some particular solutions and hardware, be it software, be it processors, all that kind of things. Who knows where this is going to take us? We'll see. So it's a bit of a, hopefully, quite a bit of it's actually very disjointed. Some of the parts have got nothing to do with each other. But the idea is that we're going to try and build a bigger picture of what's going out there, and hopefully you're going to be able to take away some of those different pieces and meld them together, either in your own mind or make you think about how these things sort of are going to go together. I'm going to sort of weave a pathway with a dodgy analogy for taking it too far with the road, and also look at, obviously we're at the VMware user group, so look at some of the VMware technologies that play into that. Everything is changing. You've got clouds, you've got IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, containers, DevOps, there's even serverless, there's hyper-converged, all SD manner of kind of things. And really it's quite difficult to know what's going on. You probably, like me, suffer from keynote-itis, where you watch keynotes, be it online or in person, and they're selling the next best, greatest thing, and you think, oh, I want a piece of that, and then some of it doesn't get delivered. Some of it never sees the light of day, or some of it isn't right for you. It's just something that's being sold. And it's tough, I appreciate that. Sometimes you're sitting in a keynote, maybe at this very moment, going, what the heck is he even talking, or is she even talking about? The analyst firms are having a field day because they get money and they've got to sell their products, and so they're telling you all about these kind of things, and you don't know what to do. And of course your CIO is bashing on your door and saying, you must be like Facebook. Is our data center like Google? Are we like AWS? Can we be as agile as Airbnb? And to be honest, the first tip is number one thing is you do not want to be building a data center like AWS or a data center like Facebook and copying the way they design switches. But what you do want to be doing is building an experience or a consumption model like these companies. So when your CEO is bashing on your door about being like them, think of it as, I don't want to build what they have, but I want to be able to give my end users the experience of what they have. Joe mentioned this morning about going around the circle. You learn stuff, gives you ideas, you build something, You build stuff, product, whatever. You then measure what that happens, and that generates some data. And this is all about going around that circle quicker and quicker. You want to do more with less. You don't want to make any mistakes. Your CIO says, yeah, it's great, you want to go around the circle and circle, but I don't want the circle to break. You want it to be really good and stay up and running. And you don't want to be spending all the time and effort going round and round the circle, bothering on the small things. And the fact is, enterprise IT is super hard. Your CEO has got their big kind of things they're looking at, and you're not going to get a pat on the back for a lot of the infrastructure stuff that you maybe take dear to your heart. There's a lot of stuff that you probably do in your day-to-day business that your CEO or CIO has no concept of what you do. And maybe that's going to annoy you, because in your performance review, they really don't care. So this is the kind of stuff, I mean, it is a bit of a joke, but you know, your CEO does not care about this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not somebody to write this on my own performance review. I did excellent TTLs for my DNS and see how far that goes. But obviously, we can't just throw technology at the problem, because there's a paradox. Adding more technology creates complexity, and that's a tough kind of thing. So sometimes you can throw money at something, but you can't always throw technology at it. So the first one of the big takeaways I want to do from this is I would like you to reset on simplicity. This needs to be the number one thing that you're thinking about in anything that you do and anything that you deploy. Get stuff out the way. Modularize whatever you're doing, be it IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, this kind of thing. Simplify your life. And the cool thing is you can actually sell this back as your business, because simplifying stuff generally makes it cheaper, easier to operate, and you can sell that as digital transformation, business transformation, whatever transformation. But you really want to be simplifying your IT. Just looking forward into the talk, there's a lot of stuff that's going to contradict itself anyway. That's the nature of IT. I'm going to talk about being simple, and then I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of complexity that's out there. So that's part of the sort of homework that you're going to do from this talk, is to look at what is simple and what is complex and try and marry that together. There's some links that I'm going to be doing in the presentation. Don't worry, you don't have to run up to the front to take a picture of it. This presentation will be on my blog at the end of it, and you can do all the links to your heart's content. So cloud. Why cloud? Horrible term, has messed us all around, made us consultants a huge amount of money, which is a good thing. But for general IT people, it's a bit of a pain. So I like to just think of cloud as the way you're doing cloud is to find efficiencies delivering services to end users. That's why we're doing cloud. That's the benefit that cloud's going to have. And you do that by driving simplicity, and you use some things to do it, and try and bake security into everything you kind of do. But cloud is cool, but the problem is it looks all nice and blue and fluffy, blue skies and fluffy clouds. But I bet, like me and a lot of people, you're a bit more stuck in the fog. And you're a bit down in the level, and that was the title of this talk, Demystifying the Future of IT, because we can all sit there in the fog and wonder, I want to see out beyond the clouds, but what does that actually mean? So I want to introduce to you the multi-cloud world, which people allude to today, and what that kind of means. Whitescale has done a State of the Cloud report, and that basically says enterprises want a multi-cloud thing. The big challenge is having resources and experience, and obviously people are interested in using AWS and Azure. But also you've got vendors bashing down your door, and you've got to be cognizant of the fact that anyone who's trying to sell you a public cloud, anyone who owns or runs a public cloud is going to sell you a public cloud. Anyone who owns or runs a private cloud or sells tooling or stuff for a private cloud is going to sell you the concept of a private cloud. So what you need to do is let common sense prevail. So what is a multi-cloud? Well, multi-cloud is just using two or more clouds. And let's not get hunkered down in a definition of private versus public cloud. But cloud is just somebody else's computer. It's going to be in your data center. It's going to be in Amazon's data center. It's going to be in Azure. It's going to be, I don't care where. Think of the new brave world of IT being a multi-cloud world, and it's going to be a mix of SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, mixed across in a whole different kind of places. You may think, why? Well, to be honest, it's already happening in your business already, and you're probably not even aware of it. Business units have individual needs. They've done shadow IT, they've bought stuff from Amazon, Azure, some other SaaS platform. That's happening whether you like it or not. And you know what, you may not like shadow IT, but the problem is if you shut it down, you're probably going to kill some innovation or kill cool stuff that your business can do. It's got advantages. You can pick the best cloud for each workload. There's agility and there's kind of things that each individual cloud does. And it gives you more flexibility in what you're going to do. You can bash your vendors because you can control their prices by threatening to go to other clouds. And you can, if you're clever, you can do disaster protection by having one cloud doing one thing and being able to back up stuff to another cloud or have stuff load balanced across multiple clouds. So this multi-cloud world is a reality. There are great benefits, but obviously there are issues. Number one being complexity. So I'll start with simplicity and then I'll talk about multi-cloud being complex and suggesting you go into a multi-cloud world. These are the kind of things you're going to have to grapple with, and I can't give you necessarily answers to that, but you need to know what's going on. The big thing with multi-cloud is expertise. I presume a lot of people here know a lot about vSphere, but how many people know about AWS or Azure or some of the SaaS, Salesforce.com? That's a tough kind of thing to be a single person in your job looking at all these different kind of clouds. You know, there are different vendors, there's different bidding, there's different security, working out what's where is very difficult in a multi-cloud world. But if we take the fact that companies are wanting a multi-cloud, that is going to happen anyway, these are some of the complexities you're going to need to work out. So what do you need to work out? Well, you need to decide what you're going to do yourself, you know, what you're going to get, what you're going to buy, what you're going to download, and what you're just going to outsource and what you're going to consume. And these are sort of some of the fundamental questions as your CIO is asking you to do more. You've got new apps coming on, you've got old apps currently in-house. Where do you put them? How do you decide what goes where? There's a rather clever chap who lives in England called Simon Wardley. Anyone aware of Wardley mapping before we start? So I know what you do. Oh, we've got a smattering of people. So Simon Wardley has done a whole bunch of things. He's got this concept of Wardley mapping, and I'm just going to dive into a little bit of it. It's fascinating and frustrating because it's at times confusing, at times hugely powerful, but he's got a really few interesting things I want to pick apart. And the first one is focusing on user needs, which I was very happy that Joe brought up this morning. So he was talking about user needs. What is that? Well, let's break it down into a simple example of if you want a cup of tea. And this is, you talk about user needs as what your actual users are, not your business. So this isn't the needs of your business to make money or make a profit or keep shareholders happy or this kind of thing for X number of people. This is your actual users. So what do users need when they need a cup of tea? Well, they need tea and they need hot water. And hot water needs what? Water and a kettle. And what does kettle need? Power. So you've got a chain of needs that goes from invisible to the user to visible to the user. And this chain of needs, we're using a silly example here about how to make a cup of tea, but that can translate into IT from invisible components all the way down from compute to power, all the way up to maybe a website or maybe a mobile app or this kind of thing. And I'd like you to think about user needs as a chain of needs that all rely on each other. A simple example would be compute, on which sits a database, on which sits an app server, on which sits a web server, to a mobile phone, something, which a user sees. So think that chain of needs. Also, everything in IT has an evolutionary flow of things, where you have this unknown to define and a novel way of thinking to something that's more common. And this can be expressed in something like this, which I've thought of an example for Exchange, for example. The genesis is a great idea. Somebody in the midst of time thought up email, and they thought, we need SMTP protocol, we need POP3, and they thought all these crazy ideas. People thought they were mad. And someone then took those ideas and went, we could build an email server. And so they custom built something that took those crazy ideas of protocols and actually built something. It didn't really work, it had lots of bugs, but it slowly got refined. Then somebody said, we could build that more up into a product, and Microsoft Exchange happened. And then somebody said, what we can also do is, in many years' time, we can advance this and said, well, instead of you having to run your product on premises, we could host Exchange for you. So you still have a VM or a physical box that runs Exchange, but you don't worry about all that kind of stuff. And then, well, actually, as it evolves, forget all that stuff going down. Why don't we just run Office 365, Exchange Online? So you don't have to deal with learning about or defining how POP3 works or custom building a mail server. This whole evolutionary flow goes on for everything IT. You have these great ideas, and it goes through a path as it becomes more well-defined, becomes more ubiquitous. And this flow is in one direction. And you need to be cognizant of the fact that you don't want to be heading back. You don't want to be writing an email protocol when you've already got Office 365. Mesh these two things together, and this is vastly complicated, so I really encourage you to read Simon's work. But you have a value chain of visible to invisible, and you've got the evolutionary flow, and it means you can actually plot your whole business on a orderly map. And on the bottom right, you've got power, compute, and web servers, and these are all the kind of things that are utility, that are stuff that you don't write your own web server component, you don't create your own power. And there's stuff on the left that you do by yourself. And so you can work out on a map in your business from your chain of needs, from what your customer sees, literally all the way down, where on the evolutionary scale things are. And this highlights some important things. So it can highlight to you, for example, things that if something is available, for example, Office 365, but you're running Exchange on premises, well, then there's a bit of a disconnect. You've got an opportunity to make things simpler by moving into the cloud. There are loads of other things we can bring up. Being able to map this out also allows you to group things together, so you can build teams in your organization based on where things are. Sorry, just going back, all the black things, when you do this mapping, on the right-hand side, that's all the stuff that you also should, if that's available, you should consume it rather than buy it as a product. And you have all these kind of teams, which I know Joe Bagley spoke about this before, but you have this concept of pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And you need clever and important people at all stages. You need the clever people to come up with these good ideas, write that first little product that you've got that nobody's ever thought of. And you need these people to write this crazy stuff. It's not going to be scalable. It's not going to work properly. It's going to have loads of bugs. And you have these people in your organization or out there, which are settlers, which then take those crazy ideas, form it into products. And then you've got your town planners, which take those kind of products and make it into a SaaS kind of model, or make it into a utility that anyone can do. And this evolution can take place over 20, 30 years. But it's an important thing to try and segregate to separate your business into this and map your business into this kind of evolutionary flow. And so that also brings us on to Bimodal IT, which people love to bash for good reasons. But it's counterintuitive why people would bash it, because you do have the old, the traditional, and you do have the new and the innovative. So stuff that you had as a product, but now it's available as a SaaS service. How do you sort of marry those two? I like to think of it as the day something goes into production, it's legacy. And legacy is not necessarily a bad word, it's obviously got baggage associated with. But what you need to do about your legacy and what you need to do about your production is continually keep looking at it and seeing how you can continually improve it. Anything that stays there for too long becomes technical debt in a millstone. I'm literally working on a project at the moment to migrate 2003 domain controllers to 2012 domain controllers. That is 10 times harder than having gone from 2003 to 2008 to 2012. And that's simply because someone's left it far too long and has created that technical debt. So I really want you to think of the Bimodal IT as taking stuff that's old, stuff that's new, but what's bad about Bimodal is there aren't just two modes. There's a very important middle mode of transitioning from one to the other. If you don't transition, you're just saying, yeah, that's fine. We leave the old stuff behind, and that builds up your technical debt and gets you into trouble. So very much understand that there are two ways of operating. You've got old stuff and you've got new stuff, and you need to be cognizant all the time of reinventing and moving things along. So you don't want to hassle also about undifferentiated heavy lifting. Things which do not improve the unique value of your business, doesn't matter. The tools, system, and processes which do improve the unique value of your organization, this is the stuff that matters. So don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you can map out your business, you can decide what you want to create, and don't create anything you can buy, get, or consume. Buy, get, or download, and don't buy, get, or download anything that you can consume from somebody else, because you're going back down that evolutionary pathway, and in a way you're reinventing the wheel. So avoid customizing this stuff. The worst thing you can do is buy a product and then customize it to hell and gone, because you're just creating more and more of a nightmare for yourself. And actually, you want to really avoid provisioning infrastructure where you can. So this is the kind of thing you want to hear from your CEO. Good job adding actual value to the organization rather than talking about DNS and TTLs. Our good friend Steve Chambers, who used to be very involved in infrastructure, had a good tweet the other day. Lumpy, bumpy, and grumpy. It made me laugh. So an interesting use case I spotted was from Microsoft IT, and they moved their Treasury department to the cloud. Now obviously, talking back about biases, Microsoft is obviously heavily influenced by Azure and wanted to use their thing, but they had some things that were interesting from a cloud migration, which is applicable to a lot of enterprises. And they've obviously got old IT, they want to go to a hybrid model or multi-cloud model, and they were trying to work out the implementation details. You know, what is commodity? What do they keep? Where do they keep it? What do they do? Where can they place things in different places? And they did a migration assessment. And the Treasury department literally looked, and 30% of all their apps and processes and stuff, they could literally just right-size it, get rid of it, bin it. And you'd be surprised how much duplication and how much crap is lying around your company that you could probably simply get rid of. 15% they convert to an existing SaaS solution. So that was stuff they maybe had a product, maybe wrote themselves. So they move, Office services to Office 365, a portal to SharePoint Online, Visual Studio Online, their source control, all these kind of things that they could literally migrate into a SaaS platform. So they're no longer maintaining those servers on premises. They're no longer dealing with all the kludge of that kind of thing, moving it up the stack. They then had 50% of their stuff, which they split into a number of different things. They could rewrite it, exposing the functionality in SaaS or PaaS. They could convert it to an Azure PaaS solution. They could then optimize for a hosted IaaS and decide not to shift it. And obviously, there's first, second, and third things to move. The basic stuff. Next to move was sort of OLTP stuff, and the costly stuff to move. They left for the latest. But literally, after this whole big thing, 5% of their stuff they decided to keep on premises. The rest of it took time, took money, took a huge amount of effort. But this whole migration gave them a lot more agility. This all needed a network. Obviously, this is Azure related, so this network diagram, they talk about data centers having connections, public or private connections to Azure and Office 365. Why not tack on Amazon? If you are going to be looking into a multi-cloud world and you're going to be hooking into these multiple clouds, thinking about your networking, thinking about security and that kind of thing, you should be thinking about having connections to cloud services from a network point of view that you're going to be accessing. So what is Microsoft's plan and what could be your plan? The stuff after you've done your assessment and you've mapped stuff out, you know where it is on the evolutionary scale. Dump it, SaaS it, PaaS it, hosted IaaS it, lift and shift IaaS it, and keep it. That's literally a run order which you can apply to your organization. There's some more multi-cloud reading I found, just a guy from Capital One and also Rackspace who've done sort of interesting, a bit of talking about the multi-cloud world. I'd also like to touch on something called your sort of superficial private cloud. Who here uses virtualization? I'm in the right place. I'm not in some catering expo. Nobody's had the politeness to tell me to shut up. Who here believes they have a private cloud? I mean, literally a smattering of hands going up. Because private cloud is damn hard. VMware says itself that 20,000 out of 500,000 customers use the vRealize suite. That's 4% of their customers are using their private cloud product. There aren't many other competitors on the market. Private cloud is tough. So, you've got to ask yourself how much effort and time and effort are you going to build doing a private cloud, or moving VMs around an IaaS layer. Maybe using cloud is a good excuse to start building some new things. And DevOps is a horrible buzzword, but it has amazing promise. And it does. And DevOps is not just for developers. We're all pretty much infrastructure people here being at a VMUG. And so the infrastructure as code and configuration management is just a super important thing that I'd really like people to wrap their heads around. Creating your data center and deploying things by policy makes it repeatable, a whole lot of manageability with built-in auditing, keeping the security things going on, and using automated tools. We need to be, if we're going to be using a multi-cloud world where we either abstracting across multiple clouds or choosing workloads to go in different clouds, you can't be provisioning stuff manually into these various clouds. You're going to drive yourself nuts. Infrastructure as code has a lot of other benefits. Reusable content, you can build the security in. I like the idea of inner sourcing, that if you can code up what your servers look like, what your apps look like, what your infrastructure or PaaS looks like in code rather than clicky, next. That inner sourcing means you can share it and you can have that code being in a text file stored on a source control system somewhere, and other people in your business can share that. It's far easier to share infrastructure as code rather than downloading a Word document and watching clicky, next. So think of infrastructure as code as humans designing things and machines operating things. And Puppet, which is a configuration management company, had this nice quote. Obviously, they're selling solutions to do this, but yeah, ultimately, in an automated, agile, cloud-friendly kind of world, this is what you need to be looking at. If not, this is always the other option, that you can enjoy the rest of your days not enjoying your job doing. So this may be counterintuitive, but one of my tips for infrastructure DevOps is don't write any code. If you have to write code, you're already missing some functionality that is elsewhere. Any code that you do write is going to create some technical debt. So you need to be cognizant of not reinventing the wheel, not building something brand new that's already out there. When you build a cloud, you want to be agile. You want to do things small. You want to create a partnership with some pilot teams and bust the silos. The worst thing you can do is hunker down for 6 months, a year, and build a cloud, and out you pop and go, ta-da, we have a cloud. And all your end users are going, yeah, it's not really what we want, not really what we asked for. So one of the DevOps principles is being able to do things in small kind of chunks, small iterations, and build things up. So an example of this is a minimum viable product where you start with something small and it grows. And an MVP isn't about building a car by just building one wheel and then 2 wheels and then the chassis. An MVP is a progression from something smaller that builds up into something small. So when you're building your cloud or building your cloud platform or building any kind of software, you want to start with something really small that you can get feedback from whoever's using it and build up stuff over time. And that building up stuff over time can happen obviously far quicker. If you're working on some massive project with 10,000 lines of code or 4,000 servers or whatever you're going to deploy, that's going to take months. But if you start with something small, you can iterate really quickly. If you think at the bottom of the DevOps where those gray lines are the deployment, and that continuous integration going around that circle, which Joe was talking about earlier, is something you can very much do with infrastructure. And this is a nice quote from Eric Kastner, who works for Etsy.com, an IT company. What's the smallest little bit you can do to get new code into production? Having these big monoliths, having these big crazy projects that go on forever, really isn't going to be helping your business. So I just need to get my timing right, otherwise I'm going to forget. And obviously phones in this day and age. Let's connect. So let's start talking some tech. I've done a whole lot of waffling on DevOps and cloud. Let's talk some tech. Hyper-converged systems, from a technology point of view, is awesome. And the reason why is not obviously often the way people think. People get hugely bogged down into infrastructure, and they love configuring switches and love configuring storage and get hugely overexcited about LUNs and things like that. The whole premise of hyper-converged systems is making things simple. And that's one of the great ways, from a hardware perspective, and adding manageability to it, you can make things simple. And one of the issues with converged systems is that I'll call out VBlock, it's the same with HP solutions or FlexPods and that kind of thing, is basically you have switches, you have storage, and you have compute. And they're only integrated in a way that someone's mashed them all together. There's no, in a way, new technology other than a new manager that goes over it. There's nothing new, it's just linking it together and someone else has done the hassle of deploying it for you. Hyper-converged takes that away and really simplifies all of that and removes a whole lot of the steps. So you don't need to provision LUNs that go through a fiber channel switch onto something, or configure host profiles on a blade system that does all that kind of thing. Hyper-converged is really much a plug-and-play infrastructure, and it's the same. Within 5 years, that 70 to 80% of your enterprise IT should be using hyper-converged. So I'm not mentioning any vendors in particular, because to be honest, it doesn't matter. If you're using a vSAN solution using VxRail or VxRack or SimpliVity or Nutanix or Maxter or any of these kind of companies, thinking of hyper-converged as a simplicity play is super important. Don't get bogged down into the speeds and feeds and how much RAM does the If it's using a VSA, does it take away from my host and everything? All of that kind of stuff really doesn't matter. The huge benefit of reducing the risk of integration and interoperability and all those kind of things, hyperconverged is super your friend. So if you aren't thinking of it now and you're doing a hardware refresh, you're hyperconverged. And VMware is taking hyperconverged to sort of the next level. And that's part of the VMware Cloud Foundation. They are bundling vSphere, vSAN, and NSX into a little platform that runs on hyperconverged and can run in many kind of places, be it on private and public clouds. So that's what VMware is, seeing the benefits of hyperconverged and taking it up. Other people have spoken about cross-cloud services. Joey mentioned it this morning as well, and the cross-cloud architecture. And this is where VMware is trying to straddle all these different kind of clouds. And this complexity, VMware is trying to come up with some ideas for solutions. They aren't products yet. To span all these multiple clouds and maybe help you with your complexity problem. So you have an on-premises software-defined data center, and you can run vSphere on-prem, you can run it in a VMware vCloud Air network, you can run vSphere on IAM, you can run vSphere on AWS. And that's a pure IaaS play, but this is a way, if you like, in your VMware that you can extend it out into further clouds. It is only at an IaaS layer, but that may be something if you're going to be lifting and shifting or moving VMs on an IaaS layer, there's something you can look at. And obviously, there are further connections to the cross-cloud architecture planned and happening with Azure, AWS, Google, Compute, and IBM Cloud. So VMware has realized that just having on-premises stuff and a hybrid thing of a one-to-one relationship isn't really what's going to happen. They're recognizing we're going to be in a multi-cloud world, and so they need to have things that they can do. Just quickly, VMware Cloud and AWS. It's literally colo with AWS. It's not as though you integrated with AWS services yet. So think of AWS providing the hardware and VMware is providing the software. But back to the simplicity thing, VMware is going to deploy vCenter for you, VMware is going to deploy vSAN for you, and VMware is going to deploy NSX for you, physically located in an Amazon data center. So from a simplicity point of view, that is great, because who enjoys deploying vCenter? No hands, excellent. You shouldn't be, that's non-differentiating, heavy lifting stuff that your CEO is not going to pat you on the back for. So this is the kind of stuff VMware is looking at doing. It's very much an IaaS layer at this stage. The VMware Cloud and AWS is operated and built by VMware. So you're not going to use your Amazon accounts for this, but this is another thing in your tool chest that you can think of using. And cross-cloud services is, at the moment it's vaporware, it isn't a product, but it's VMware's idea of being able to manage cross-clouds, being able to do showback and billing, and maybe some performance stuff, and maybe some provisioning stuff, and maybe a whole lot of stuff. But cross-cloud services is VMware's glue, maybe that'll come out sometime with some products about managing all these different kind of clouds. Now, something I just want to give VMware some credit for at the moment, because it's easy to bash an incumbent vendor. But VMware's done a lot of work on refocusing on the core, which I'd like to call out and appreciate. They're coming out of the VCSA, which is the appliance model. Anyone who's using the VCSA? Good job. Probably about 2/3 of people. This ties immediately to simplicity. Installing vCenter on Windows with all the crap and the issues and stuff that can happen. Simplicity is a great driver. The VCSA is with that. The migrate to VCSA is a way you can migrate from Windows to people who haven't done that yet to the VCSA. It's crazy they didn't do this first. I mean, it's a silly idea that they came with a VCSA without a migration tool, but it's here, and that's something that's very useful. Interestingly, talking with VMware people, vSAN is driving vCenter and vSphere like crazy, because the vSAN people are hungry, they're keen, they've got new features, and they look at ESX and there's some things that they don't like and things that don't work, and certainly in vCenter there are things that are wrong, or things that are clunky, or things that are funny, and the vSAN team is really pushing hard for the rest of VMware, which is sort of shaking things up a bit and making it good. The HTML5 web client, everybody obviously adores the Flash client, not at all. So I mean, that's something that we joke about. The HTML web client isn't here yet, but every week there's a new build coming out. I mean, whenever did VMware come out with a new product iteration, even if it is in beta every single week? And the VMware validated designs, to set up the SDDC make anyone's hair grey. It's a huge amount of work. Well, VMware has literally productized that into a document that you can download and you can install it yourself. So you don't have to go and pay an expensive consultancy company to come and do it for you. Sorry for the consultants over here, but that's the way life is. VMware is providing this kind of information. The REST API, they've had all these disparate APIs, that's all coming together, and they're doing a lot of work. Project Clarity is a new design model for what web pages look like, and that's open source as well. So you'll see a lot of VMware products starting to look at it and feel the same. So definitely a good refocus on the core. I think VMware got a bit complacent, and they realized they were sort of the only shop in town. But in this multi-cloud world, huge pressure from other kind of companies. So I'm glad to see that VMware is having a good focus on the core. So let's talk some more tech. Monoliths versus microservices. Everybody's running all their workloads in containers, I assume? No. Anybody running any workloads in containers? A few hands. That's the reality of it. The thing is, microservices and containers is sort of interchangeable concept just to keep things simple. But containers are going to be super important going forward, and it's something that's exciting to look at and something that's exciting to find out about. They focus on doing one thing, being small and doing one thing well. If you're going to simplify, if you're going to modularize your infrastructure, your estate, your application, containers is a great way of doing it. It is infrastructure as code. I won't go into the specifics of Dockerfile, but everyone's heard of Docker. The way you code stuff in Docker is in a file. It's a text file, it's infrastructure as code. Containers are also not installed. There's no next finish to install a container. They're built by a process. And they are very multi-cloud aware. Whether you deploy a Docker container on AWS or on vSphere or on Windows or on Linux, it's pretty much the same process. And developers love Docker. And infrastructure people love Docker too once they have a play with it. Because it's as simple as this. On a developer's laptop, they build a little funky kind of app, and they build it, and they push it to a cloud, and in production, you pull it from a cloud and you run it. It's literally those kind of 4 commands at a very simplistic level. But it's all new. And it's a bit crazy and it's a bit daunting, because literally in the last year or 2 years, all of these companies are jumping on the bandwagon for containers. And it can be super confusing. So our good friend Massimo has actually done a talk on this at VMworld, and he did it earlier today. And he's going through some of the confusion and some of the chaos of the whole cloud-native container kind of world. So there's a YouTube link to his VMworld presentation. If you're new into containers, go and have a look at that, and it will be a bit of a reality check from the hype, and it's very worth your while watching. So on to cloud-native applications. VMware's got a whole bunch of applications and things they're working on, which are from taking your containers from a developer's laptop through a development lifecycle and onto a production stack. Briefly, just to go through, because we haven't got huge amounts of time today, there's a whole business division dedicated to cloud-native apps. 2 kind of things. One is existing IT environments, where they've come up with a suite of things called vSphere integrated containers, and another thing called Photon Platform. And Photon Platform is a way for natively running containers on a bare metal system sort of based on ESXi. VMware don't help themselves though, because they have been releasing a whole bunch of products, and then they sort of change what they're doing, they change their names. So the whole idea of the whole cloud-native world is sort of around a thing called a Photon. There are various Photon-ish things. One is Photon OS, so VMware's come up with its own minimal Linux OS to run containers on. And there's Admiral, Harbor, and Lightwave, which are ancillary kind of things, which are all part of something called vSphere integrated containers. vSphere integrated containers is a great idea, and it's actually built into vSphere 6.5. That's correct, Massimo? So vSphere 6.5 has vSphere integrated containers built in, and this is a way that you can run containers on vSphere without having to change anything on vSphere. The reason you want to do that is if you run containers, it's got a Docker front end, and it's going to be pluggable, so Docker for now, but can be pluggable from your developers from any other point of view. They literally run those Docker commands that we saw on the other slide, and in the background, VMware does a whole bunch of crazy kind of fun stuff to spin up a VM per container on the back end, so you can plug it into VROps, VRA, and so you can treat those crazy ephemeral or stateful containers in a way as VMs and have all the manageability, have all the security, have all that kind of stuff. And so that's going to be built in. So this is sort of a halfway house that you don't need to be provisioning bare metal stuff or have separate silos of infrastructure for your containers. vSphere integrated containers is it. But they're also working on something called Photon Machine. Photon Machine is hugely exciting, although we know nothing about it because it's not released. And that's literally a native new version of ESX sometime that is going to be running a microvisor. Because for true cloud-native applications, you don't need HA, you don't need a DRS, because they're all going to spawn off like unicorns all by themselves from an automated fashion. And so they're writing a new sort of version of ESXi that's going to be extremely cloud-native, and that's called Photon Machine. And then you've got Photon Controller, which is going to be a control plane. It's all about this to manage all of this. So you're also thinking, well, why do you need two different kind of things? Kit Colbert, who's the CTO of VMware Cloud Native thing, had a good slide, and he said, if you're on a plane, a cargo plane is simply an analogy for the Photon platform. So a cargo plane is literally lots of small boxes that Amazon or DHL is shipping around the world. But you've also got other planes that also have passengers as well as cargo. So vSphere integrated containers is the passengers and cargo analysis. And one day in the future, if you're going to get super all excited and go heavily into the container route and only have containers for some part of your infrastructure, well, at that stage, a cargo plane is going to be good. So the next thing we want to talk about in your multi-cloud landscape is PaaS. And what is PaaS? Another bandied around term that has a lot of negative and funny connotations about what it is and isn't. Think of it as simply as this. PaaS is you write code and you deploy code somewhere else. PaaS takes care of all the infrastructure heavy lifting. Scale, availability, performance. Your developers do not need to know, do not need to care about any of the infrastructure stuff. If developers do need to deploy infrastructure, and that's even including a container in the strict sense of the word, or a VM or that kind of thing, you ain't got a PaaS. And there are sort of two different families of PaaSes. One is a very opinionated, structured way, which is things like CloudFoundry, Heroku, and Azure, where they are very prescriptive about what the PaaS can and cannot do. And you may think that's a negative thing, but it's actually a very positive thing because it's got a very small, they may be broad, but a very sort of limited set of services. And if you can target those services, a PaaS can be super powerful. Or you can basically wing it to do your own kind of thing. With that whole ecosystem slide with containers, you can lump a whole bunch of those things together and build your own PaaS. So that's another way of doing it. So one of the big PaaSes around the world is a thing called CloudFoundry. And this was basically born in VMware in 2010. It's open source and spun off into its own company called Pivotal. So if you've heard of Pivotal now within the Dell EMC family, CloudFoundry is part of that. And the cool thing from a multi-cloud point of view, it is already multi-cloud. Take my app, deploy it into production, deploy it into test, wherever, and that cloud can be on-premises cloud, a Pivotal CloudFoundry, which is a commercial offering they do, from Azure to AWS to Atos, all these different kind of things. So think about that. You can write an app, and you can deploy it on Azure, or on AWS, or on Pivotal CloudFoundry running in any number of data centers without having a different app. That is hugely powerful. That's a way that you can leverage this multi-cloud world where you're no longer restricted by the infrastructure you need, and you can, by policy or by whatever means, shape or form, is pick your IaaS platform, but don't have to change your code, and that's going to be super important. If you're interested in trying playing with CloudFoundry, and I seriously recommend you do, Ricky did a session earlier, and he's actually written a quick install guide for the Home Lab edition. So there's a link to his blog. Go and have a look at Ricky's blog about getting up to stage with CloudFoundry. Interesting thing about CloudFoundry, VMware has 500,000 customers. CloudFoundry already has 250,000 customers. So if you think CloudFoundry has half the number of customers as VMware, so it's obviously something very I would suggest you look at. But there's more. You can't have a presentation about the future of IT without talking about servers. What a useless term as well. Because funny enough, there are servers behind serverless. But serverless is basically functions as a service. And this, in a way, is a progression of that evolutionary pathway. Serverless is you write some code, be it in JavaScript or something, and you give it to Amazon, you give it to Azure, and you give it to IBM OpenList, and they run it for you. You don't have to spin up a container. You don't have to run a load balancer. You don't have to manage a PaaS. There is no PaaS that you even see. And if your function doesn't run, you don't get paid for it. So think of it as if you're processing, something like Just Eat uses a whole bunch of these kind of functions as a service via AWS Lambda. And I think it's every time somebody orders something, it spins up a whole bunch of these functions and then shuts them down. So Friday night between 7 and 9 p.m., loads of people ordering their curries and their pizzas. They've got this amazingly scalable system, and when it shuts down at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, they're not paying for hosting any containers or any VMs anywhere because they're just using a function. It's all brand new. It is a bit of a crazy world kind of stuff, but just keep it in mind, and you can go and have a look at it. There's a conference that was had. Unique kernels, Joe mentioned it this morning. Just a super stripped down OS, which may be the way containers may go to, or VMs may go to in the future. Mini services is something that Gartner's come up with, help them, and it's basically squishing using monolithic apps in microservices. If you're interested, go have a look. Another cool tech you need to have a look at is VMware Exoclones. Now this is basically vSAN cloud native app storage. And this, when Joe was alluding this morning about spanning data stores across multiple clouds, Exoclones is something that's going to be with it. I've also got this thing they're going to be building, and this is all vaporware, it's just crazy ideas at the moment, a thing called portable snapshots. Imagine snapshotting a VM, an on-premises VM, moving that snapshot to AWS, and then powering it on, not converting it, not doing anything. VMware is working on Exoclones. Go and have a read about that, because it just does sound something that's exciting. So, automation and APIs, obviously super important in this whole cloud-native world, and there's just so much going on. It's sort of exciting. VMware doing their RESTful APIs across all of their products, and if you didn't know, the senior product manager for all of VMware APIs is a guy called Alan Renouf, who is used to be from the UK, and he used to attend the London VMUG, and he was literally one of us kind of guys doing the drudge of daily IT, and he's worked himself up the chain, and he's actually responsible for all APIs at VMware. Interesting. PowerShell and PowerCLI, Linux on Mac, how bizarre is that? But back to the point I said before is, don't code if you don't have to. Really, if you're having to run a whole bunch of automation and stuff, really question whether you're even doing it. If you've got the wrong process, or you're doing stupid automated stuff that shouldn't be in the process, it's fantastic that you're going to automate that and make it quickly, but always question, am I actually automating the right process, or should I just get rid of the process in the first place? Obviously, if you don't understand that something, you can't automate it, and means improving any kind of process means understanding the process. So automation is not simply about writing PowerShell scripts. I want to paint the picture of it's a bigger thing. Of automation is great, you can do a whole bunch of things, but think about what you're automating, and in a way it sounds counterintuitive, but avoid automating stuff that you don't need to. If there's a function out there, or there's a product feature out there that you can leverage already, go for it. Open source is also a massive thing that's just getting bigger and bigger. The cloud literally is built on open source. Business critical processes all over the world are running on open source. Ubuntu hasn't been going for many years. Did you know it's a South African who started Ubuntu? He was actually a year ahead of me at school. And he's obviously done a little bit better in life than I have, but we will give him that. Ubuntu literally runs 70% of all cloud workloads run on Ubuntu. IoT, Ubuntu runs, I think, is the biggest Linux installed on Azure. It's huge, and it's open source. Windows, Microsoft is going massively into open source at the moment. Who would have thought? It gives you the ultimate control. It's not about a cost thing. It can be partly about a cost thing, but if you're only doing open source to save licensing things, that's not really where your savings are going to be. It's more about using standards-based stuff, not being beholden to vendors, Docker is open source. You can literally look at the source code of Docker. And VMware is doing a huge amount of stuff with open source. That slide I had previously with Lightwave and Photon Platform and vSphere integrated containers. vSphere integrated containers is all open source. You can look on GitHub and see all the goodness that VMware is producing. So really, think of open source as another tool chest another tool belt in your tool chest, and something you should really be looking at. So, security. Security is another thing, looking into the future of IT, that you really wonder what the heck you're going to do. Part of it with infrastructure as code is literally remove the humans from the process. If humans don't have access to stuff, they can't break it. If somebody compromises a human or a PC or a process, they can't break something. Infrastructure as code is great for security. One thing you can do, in fact, the first thing that you should do for security is your config management, patch management, and password management. These are literally the simple things that you need to look right. If you're being hacked because you haven't got a patch, that's on you. Who deploys the VCSA, for example, from VMware and keeps the default password? You can own up if you want to. Think of all the kind of things you deploy and maybe keep the default passwords. You'll be amazed how often that is the case. Where I work, we do continual pen testing. And the stuff that they come out with every time, just the bad defaults that people use is incredible. So, look at password management. That is really something to be cognizant of. Your perimeter defense is dead. Just having a firewall at the border of your company to the internet is no longer good enough. Hackers are going to get in. Thanks so much for coming.